Hey, everybody, welcome back to another NDBI Navigator Narratives Podcast. I am super excited to introduce you all to an amazing board certified behavior analyst named Ania Petrova, who is joining us. And she is also the founder of Comprehensive ABA. Anya, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this and really looking forward to having a conversation about all things NDBI.
Yes, and I'm so excited because I got to know you through the NDBI Connections Conference last year, and you did an incredible presentation, and I got to learn a little bit more about your mission and kind of your vision for what you're trying to do. But before we get into that, can you give us the, 5-minute spiel introduction of who you are and what you've been doing over the years?
Absolutely. It's always such a hard thing to do to talk about yourself. I have never been really good at that, so I'm going to do my best to who I am and what has led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people always ask, how do you get into ABA? And that's such an interesting conversation to have because everybody always enters into the ABA world in a different way for a different reason. And mine had been more of an aha moment when I worked in the New York City area. So I was actually still in my undergrad program at Penn State, and I had done an internship at a pediatric therapy practice in Hoboken, New Jersey. And I was learning about occupational therapy and physical therapy, speech therapy, counseling. And there I had actually started learning about ABA. We had BCBAs coming in at the time. No one really knew what that was. And I knew I wanted to go into grad school, but I didn't exactly know which area of grad school I wanted to go into just yet. I just knew that I wanted to work in a therapeutic environment with young children.
Okay.
I thought occupational therapy would be it. I thought that might be the route that I wanted to go. And then whenever I learned about ABA, I had really fell in love with helping support families and children in a way that is really meaningful and that supports more than just like maybe some of the things that occupational therapy does. I
Mhm.
was able to learn how you can work in schools and daycares and early intervention. I started doing a deep dive, and that is when I had started working for the Lovas Institute in the East Coast office, which I was very excited to get that opportunity and train through the Lovas methods. And that had taken me into, once I had graduated, I started working in the New York City early intervention system
Love
and
it.
CPSC. At the time, I was doing both, so working early intervention and CPSC, so birth to three and then three to five, traveling all throughout all the boroughs, also in North New Jersey. It's funny because at the time I didn't have an iPhone or anything like that. So I had to map quest how to get from each location, which
Magellan.
and if you missed your bus, you had to figure it out. Or if you missed the train, you just had to figure it out on the spot with the timetable, which was always such an interesting process. But through that, I had come to find an opportunity with Sarah Khan, who is my somebody I've always looked up to, who is the owner and director of Children First in Manhattan. And she had worked with Dr. Lovas and had was looking for others who were trained in the Lovas method to help support early intervention and the CPSE age and things like that. So we had worked together alongside a group of other people that she had also hired for many years in the Manhattan area, which was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my career. I was able to go into all different types of schools and locations and centers, working privately with so many different families across the area. And it was a wonderful experience because that really helped form who I am as a provider today. Really partnering with families, partnering with schools, partnering with agencies, partnering and learning more about related services and speech therapy and physical therapists and all of those things that are really needed to comprehensively work together to help support families. And then ultimately moved to the Philadelphia area to be closer to family. My husband and I we were married in the Hoboken area and had both of our children there, but we needed to be closer to family and
Yep.
had moved closer to the Philadelphia area and worked for a few different places. I had started my LLC. I also started supporting and working with Elevated Kids, which Amberly Cavallero, who's the CEO, who we partnered with to do that CEU that at the conference that I was so excited and I was so excited to be able to work together with her to be able to do that. So that was just an amazing opportunity. And then we got to meet and have more conversations and what NDBI looks like and how to disseminate that across different places and people and things and all the generalization that could happen through ABA. So I hope I covered everything in a sense of like the short snippets of my journey, but it's been a really exciting one.
I love it. I love hearing like the geography. I would never be able to take a bus. There's no way I could do it. I'm just so geographically challenged. And then on the spot, like with the MapQuest printout, I'm having flashbacks from like late 90s of trying to consult around Denver. Like, oh my God, I used to have a map to literally drive and I couldn't do it these days. I'm so dependent on technology. And I didn't know that you were kind of starting out and kind of having an interest in occupational therapy. That's also why I went to school and then I got into ABA and I just kind of pivoted out of that program and just went a different direction. How did you get from Lovasi style teaching? Mine was card Lovasi as well,
Uh,
to the NDBI where it's a bit different, kind of different focus. Where did that pivot happen for you? Was it when you moved back to Philly?
it's a great question. And I wonder sometimes how many people go through that journey themselves too as BCBAs. And I was starting to think about what do I want to do when I was in the Philadelphia area.
Mm,
And at the time, there wasn't a perfect fit for what I was looking for as I made the shift from the New York City area. And one of those things were how do I support really young children,
yep.
but not through specifically early intervention systems.
Mhm.
And that's where Elevated Kids had come into play. And there was a job posting about NDBI, and I had a gut feeling and took the leap. And so thankful for that opportunity and so thankful for everything that I had learned through that process because I had to really pivot.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest challenge right now when we look at NDBI. I see that being a little easier now because
Mm,
there's more resources available. But in 2019, there weren't many, I
yeah.
have to say, that I could really, really sink into. You had Project Impact, this amazing training program, Early Start Denver model, amazing training program, all of these different things that fit under the umbrella of NDBIs. And you had those resources, but the application of it was a little harder to find. And
Mm,
what did that look like in practice? And what did that look like in coaching and training? And what did that look like in terms of navigating systems such as early childhood programs and teachers that
mm,
were used to ABA being DTT? And
yeah.
ABA being discrete trial in the way that many people had known ABA to be up until that point. It's really pivoted and changed. And I do credit social media to be a big part of that too. I think there are a lot of things out there now. The neurodiversity affirming approaches and media around that had really exploded, and things just really started taking form
Hmm.
that I started seeing more and more people the outside of the circles that I was part of, learning more about NDBI and neurodiversity affirming care.
Oh,
And that was
yeah.
groundbreaking. That was something that I had never seen in the field before. It almost took me back to my early intervention days back in New York City, where you had to be more creative, more
Yes.
developmentally focused. And I really missed that. And I just had this aha moment like, this is it. This is where we need to move towards with young children.
Yeah,
In
I'm
a
home.
group
Like I'm home. I feel home. I feel settled.
Absolutely. And you started having conversations with more and more providers that were feeling similarly, really looking for care that really suited families and suited young children more than some of the practices that are synonymous with DTT.
Mhm.
And it just really it really took form, and having to create and work together as a team with multiple providers, because it really is, it's a team effort. It's a team of researchers, it's who you work with, it's who you listen to, it's who you're around. You've put out so many beautiful resources. It's like really coming together as a community. It's not just, there's no I in team. It's everybody's working together to figure out what does this mean, and listening to autistic voices and listening to people that really matter in helping figure out what this looks like long term, and how do we bridge that gap so that we see progress, and see progress in a way that children are really benefiting from it, and it's not in creating the stress for families and children feel safe and they feel heard and they feel like they have a person that they can lean on to whenever they're not feeling the kind of feeling not, oh, they don't quite know what's happening in the moment, and trying to help them find that voice and be that voice for them to bridge that gap again. So it's been a really interesting evolution of the field across the many years. Excuse me. But it has been wonderful to see.
Yeah, I love it. I love to hear that. Sometimes I feel a little envy for newbies that are starting out who have NDBI trainings, manuals, resources, programs available that they can just start with. And then on the other side, hindsight looking back, I appreciate the journey of coming out of a more structured, adult-centered mass trial kind of approach to getting to where I am now in the NDBI world of really seeing why it's important that for young children, we really think about this developmentally appropriate practice. And when we support autistic children, that we're looking at neuro-affirming or neurodiversity-affirming models and methods and that mindset. And so I feel like that's really, like you said, kind of shaped the process of where we're at, kind of standing on the shoulders of people that, have come before us. And you touched on something that I wanted to circle back to. We have talked about before, really that application. So we are building out this community, and there are resources available now to learn, to buy the book, more presentations at conferences, more specific conferences. But one of the things you touched on, and I think it is something that's still needed, and I believe this is the focus of comprehensive ABA, is helping with the systems or that trickle down application, how to do this in practice, which is, I would imagine, a pain point for a lot of providers that are listening. Sounds great. I'm interested, but I don't know how to do that. Is that something you want to chat about?
Absolutely.
Mm.
It is such a barrier and a gap
Yeah.
currently. I feel that when I've spoken to different agencies and I've spoken to different types of providers and people who are trying to figure out what this looks like to create a practice and expand their practice, or take their current practice that is really large and trying to figure out how do we move more towards an NDBI focus? How do we move more towards a neurodiversity affirming focus? And the challenge with that is multifaceted in so many ways. It can be something as simple as insurance reimbursement and insurance payers and audits, and trying to get authorizations with an NDBI focus, with goals that are NDBI focused in writing, and goals that are more neurodiversity affirming, and not targeting things
Yeah.
specifically like you might have done in the past with some other agencies or with some other methods and things like that. So really trying to look at what does this look like from a systems perspective to make sure families are getting what they need,
Yeah.
children are getting what they need, and it still falls within a applied behavioral analytical methodology and
Yeah.
NDBI as well. That
Yeah.
has been a big challenge that I know many people face, and through Comprehensive ABA, which is my company that I help support and bridge that gap between agencies and companies and preschools and early childhood programs and just anywhere that there's a young child that may need that support. I'm hoping to be there to have those conversations and to potentially create those trainings and train and coach the teachers and coach the providers and looking at that from a big system. It's a big bite to take, but it's one that I love taking. Anybody who knows me will
You're
easily
hungry.
say that it's one that I love taking. I am a very much so let's do it type of mentality, and I don't like to go into things with like too much thought into it, like let's fix it, or let's make it better, or it's already great. How do we expand it and keep going? And how do we create these innovative practices? And how do we turn our gears and start thinking? And I've multiple people have always said they love whenever they see me on the spot because you could actively see the gears turning in my head. I want to figure it out. I love the creating energy around it too, because I think that if you really create an energy around trying to look at something different. I love different thinking. I love the way that people come together. It really is a group effort. It never is a one person thing. It always is everybody needs to come together because everybody brings something different. Everybody has strengths and differences. And what I'm good at is not what everybody else is good at. And what that person's good at, I'm definitely not good at that. So it's good to come together and really bring in your strengths because then you have this comprehensive, really collective type of mentality that makes change.
Yeah.
That's how you make the change, is how you come together and figure out what that looks like. And that's also in locations too. So what works in Philadelphia might not work in New York, which might not work in San Francisco, and that might not work in London, and that might not work in Moscow, and that might not work in all these other places. And
Mm.
because my background, my family is Polish, so I have a Polish background, and my husband's Russian, so we have a Russian background, and we have friends and family all over the world, which I've been so fortunate to see how these early education systems and
Yep.
ABA practices look like across the world. It really is different, and it's not one size fits all. And you have to be really creative and figure out that comprehensive solution for that system, for that location, for that culture, for the way that people do things, because that does matter. Governments and systems, everything's just very different no matter where you go. So it's important to take that into consideration when trying to support young children because we're all human,
Yeah.
but we live in different ways,
Right.
and that's important to take into account as well.
Yes, and I feel like that comprehensive ABA mindset model that you have cultivated really takes into consideration the culture, the different cultures, whether it be across the world or across one setting to another, right? Maybe in Philly, this is a culture you would find in an early childhood program. This is a culture that you would find in a ABA type center with integrated care, and they could be vastly different. And I talk a lot about, the Navigator logo is like a compass leading the way, guiding, right? Kind of keeping people on the right track and kind of moving the compass needle to more NDBI informed models. And I think that's the same thing when we're talking about community applications. What is that vision, right? Where is that needle moving us towards in terms of getting us where we want to go to best support young autistic children? And it's more neuroaffirming or strength-based. And one of the challenges that you posed is, I'm sure, a pain point for a lot of providers and practitioners who are listening. How do we do that within a deficit-based medical model per the insurance funders, what they're looking for? How do we make that work? And I think it can be done with being very creative and having, we talk about jargon, with a parent or a caregiver, I might describe something one way, but for an insurance reviewer, I might describe it a different way. And I'm saying the same thing, but my community or my audience who I'm talking to, I'm presenting it in a different format. So I do think we can have goals that are deficit based, written in a way that also highlight the strengths and kind of let parents know this is what we're about, what our mission is and our values are. But also, we have to work within the system, and that systems change is maybe one day that will pivot. But right now, that's where we're at if we want to access those funding and services. So I feel like it's tricky, but being creative and innovative and collaborative are great ways for us to start to do that,
Mhm.
which I'm sure you're
Exactly.
tackling head on.
Yep. Yeah, it is a challenge. So sorry. It is a challenge because you do have you have different payers that have different perspectives too. And different payers from different states
Yes.
all vary too. So you're looking at things that would be okay in one state that might not be okay in another state because maybe one state will authorize play-based goals and another state will not authorize play-based goals. And looking at what still falls within the DSM, what still falls with what is meaningful for the child, and looking at what are the skills they need to be really successful going forward. And how do we help really take those skills, build them, and really help them find their pathway of where they're going to go with vocation and education and what they really love doing. How do they create friendships? How do they create bonds with other people? What's meaningful for that for all children? What does that look like? How do we cultivate a way that as a society we can work together to really find what's impactful for us? And that is the challenge I pose to a lot of providers is how do we reflect what's really, really important for that child?
Right.
And it's hard when you have a 2-year-old because they don't know, you don't know, and it's
Yeah.
really up to the parent at that point to help guide that and help determine what that looks like. And then the other side of it too is really looking at family values and family rules too. And there is something to be said about sometimes it is important to have a standard of what your family looks like, what your values are, what your culture is, what your language supports, what does your family structure look like? Do you have multiple generations in the household? And that's something I've really loved learning about through working through many big cities and through just my experiences across my life is every family structure is different. And it's really, really important to listen and it's not always what is said is what is heard. And
Yeah.
so really trying to understand and ask really meaningful questions. Ask what's important to the family. What is something that you want to do? What is something you don't want to do? What is something that you can work together? What does your day look like? What do your routines look like? What is something that you want to do more of that you might not be able to do right now? And maybe that's something that's just through having young children. And that's just a phase of your life of having young children, might not be able to go to as many restaurants as you had in the past, might not be able to take these long airplane trips as you had in the past. Maybe you really want to go see your parents and they're halfway across the world and you don't know how to support your child in the best way possible to get on that plane to get there. And something I always talk about, I've said this to many, many people, I love using airplane travel as an analogy for supporting families and children.
Okay.
And one of the ones that I've always tried to figure out how can I get another provider, maybe an occupational therapist or speech therapist that might not know much about NDBI yet, or maybe it's a preschool teacher, or maybe it's a parent. How can I help them understand kind of where we are? And one of the things that I always like to tell some of the providers is my airplane. I have multiple airplane analogies. Maybe it's just because um,
Travel.
I love travel. It's one of my things. Everybody knows like food and travel. That's who I am. If there's food and there's travel involved, that's I'm
Right.
in. And the airplane analogy is there. I have two of them. One of them is airplane travel is one of the only things us as adults that we sign up for that we have zero control of. We pay to have zero control.
Yeah.
We From the moment we get into the airport and we have a suitcase, we no longer control what we have. We can't control how much we bring. We can't control what we're going to put into it. We can't control anything past security. It's kind of like international law at that point. You can't control when your plane's leaving. If you're late, it's going without you. So you have to be there. You're going to have to figure yourself out at that point. You can't control who you're sitting next to. You can't control who your flight attendant is. You can't control who your pilot is. You can't control turbulence or a delay or any of those things. And it's one of those things that we can't control. And that is why airplane travel is one of the most stressful situations for so many people. And when you think about when you're in a situation that you have zero control of, you just have to be and go, and they're telling you what to do, and they're telling you what to do, and this is what's happening, this is what's happening, and you can't control anything, how do you feel? typically feel really anxious and upset or heightened, or I have a terrible time sleeping. Even though I love traveling, I hate airplane travel. So I
Yeah.
have a terrible time sleeping on planes. And we typically, when we travel, will take a longer flight and sometimes a red eye.
Yeah.
Not my best flights that there is, but is one that we take because it makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I don't have any control in that situation, and it makes me more heightened. And let's say we get to a location and I don't know the language, I don't know how to communicate, and I just get thrown into a situation that I don't know what to do.
Mm.
How do I feel about that? Same situation. So when we think about young children, when we are taking them to a new location, we're taking them to the first day of daycare, they've never been to daycare before, they don't have the resources, they don't have the translator and the Google Translate, and they don't have everything that they need. They don't have their favorite person next to them to make them feel really grounded and comfortable. And we just drop them off like, have a good day. What does that look like for them if they don't know what to expect, how to communicate? What is that going to look like? And we're going to see a higher rate of behavior.
Yeah.
And that is something that we, as early childhood professionals, need to take into, and we do, I believe that most people do, take into account what does that look like from a all childhood perspective, and what does that look like for a child who may have not found their communicative path yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
And being able to advocate for themselves and being able to validate their feelings and protesting and sometimes teachers will say, well, all that child's saying is no right now. I'm like, yeah, but 2 months ago they were biting and now they're saying no. This is such a wonderful improvement. Let's go ahead and allow the no, and let's work towards saying different ways of saying no now too. So really looking at what does that look like across that scale of things. And then I also have another, and that's kind of the short of my airplane analogy. I have a much longer one for that one. And then I have a second one that I like to talk about, that I like to look at a child's ABA journey as a flight, and where they take off and where they land. And where they take off is the place that they are currently.
Yeah.
And where they land, it's wherever their favorite place is. Disney World, maybe it's home, wherever it is, like wherever their most favorite place is. And there's going to be bumps, and there's going to be turbulence, and there's going to be different accommodations that need to be given, and there's going to be all these things that are going to really support that child along the way. And it is our responsibility to be there to support them along that journey and to make that as comfortable and as meaningful and as just
Yeah.
following that journey and that growth along the way so that they can land and they're like, what a wonderful experience. There's still going to be turbulence, but you're there. You got
And
it.
is that destination they're going to, or the airplane, like you said, accommodations or support from the flight attendants, quote, quote, on that hypothetical plane, are they supporting the child in a way to a path that is the best for that child to improve quality of life and to support parents and caregivers? Do they take a different flight at some points in their treatment or their intervention support? I love the analogy because I also love to travel and I love food and I will travel for food. So how do we really get other people to understand once we get that plane to that destination, that that destination is also accommodating to them? Like you said, he says no. Well, how can we arrange the environment so there's not as many things to say no to? Or how do we help him learn co-regulation? And that no can be part of a yes environment, right? And so looking at the young children say no a lot developmentally. That's what we want them to do, right? I would be more concerned about a child who did not protest, who did not assert themselves, who did not have a vocal opinion about what kind of colored cup they want. That would worry me more because that's just a part of kids kind of going through these phases. And for me, it's a good thing for them to have that voice and to be a self advocate. And then, yes, it might present some challenging behaviors or unwanted behaviors, but what young child doesn't encounter that at some point? And so finding those journeys in that plane to get the kids to the right destination. And I love kind of circling back to what you talked about with collaborating and partnering with parents and other providers, having this team kind of community village approach with when that child gets older, their input as well. What are we thinking about in terms of support for this child? Programming goals. Is it meaningful? Does it matter? Is it socially valid for where they're at 2, 3, 4, right? Every one keeps changing as we evolve and we grow, and that programming is going to change as well. And for me, I love how that could map onto your analogy of that flight path, just different airport, different landing place, and
Mhm.
having it come back to that, multiple people who manage that plane, the pilot, right? So that analogy of partnering with everybody.
Yep, yep. And I've heard one recently too about planes, which I love, and I've used it a couple times too, is sometimes you need that pilot to make that decision. And you need that person to make that decision, because sometimes it is it's a little bit uncharted territory, or maybe the wing falls off. And like, oh, what do you want to do? And the child's like, I don't know. Like, shouldn't you know? You're the parent, or you're the pilot. Shouldn't you know what to do? So sometimes that guidance is really important too. So allowing for this strength-based approach, but still offering that guidance and that very methodological, where you're looking at what is best practice and
Mhm.
what is that child's strengths, and how do we merge the two together, because it's going to pivot and change, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be different with the seasons. It's going to be different. Sometimes I used to joke that I would wake up on the wrong side of the bed and like, oh, today is going to be like, I hope today is going to be smooth in terms of my transit, in terms of my bus, in terms of navigating all the different things across different cases around the city. And almost every time when I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, everybody else woke up on the wrong side of the bed too. It was just like something with the moon, something with
Wait.
stars. Like there's just something out there that potentially shifted and changed that. And I've learned to have a lot of grace and a lot of compassion and a lot of patience. And I might have not had that as much whenever I was a young BCBA, whereas I am right now. I think the journey has really evolved and shifted as a provider myself too. And knowing that everybody's coming into this experience and everybody's at the best place they need to be right now in their professional journey. And how do we all just keep growing and learning together, which kind of takes back to what you had mentioned earlier with the coaching and looking at RBTs and BCBAs and trying to figure out, how do we do this? What does this implementation look like? What does this look like in practice? What does this look like across locations? Is it center-based? Is it home-based? Is it community-based? Is it school-based? And that really does look different across every location. And there's benefits to some, and there's some challenges to some locations and environments, and there's benefits to others, and there's some challenges with that. And that's just how the cookie crumbles, in a sense. It's just, you always are going to have these different caveats to different things. And I think the challenge when we look at training and coaching others is, where are they currently? What are their own goals? What are they looking for? What would they like to do long term or short term? I know we had spoken at some point about short term, 5-year goals, 10-year goals, things like that. And I don't even know. So I can't expect anybody else to know about in any way, shape, or form. And sometimes people don't know. They're like, I'm just letting it go as it is. And the challenge with that is trying to help teach in a way that provider, whether that's an RBT, a BCBA, a related service, maybe that's a parent or caregiver, grandparent, whoever it is in that child's life, how do they learn best?
Yeah.
What do they know already? What would they like to know? How can they be collaborative in the goal setting process? How can they partner together with the whole team? And then how do we make sure it's still individualized for each individual person? Because as a BCBA, it's a huge lift to try to navigate helping support different learning styles also. But if you're on a team and you're the lead BCBA and you have RBTs, or maybe you have BCBAs who are providing direct support, and then you have a child, you have parents, you have teachers, and you have maybe a wider community scale, maybe after school program, maybe you have a daycare, maybe you have grandparents or neighbors or aunts or uncles or friends in the neighborhood that come into your sessions sometimes. There's all these different things that could happen. How do we teach all of those different people, and not teach, because I don't like using that word necessarily, but how do we partner with all of these different people to figure out, how do we work together to keep, and it's so individualized. It's so different with every situation. You have family structures that are different. You have a stay-at-home parent, and maybe a working parent. Maybe you have a single parent who is a working parent. Maybe you have a single parent who is not working but lives with grandparents. And there's all these different formats that I have seen across family structures that it looks different. Sometimes you're going to get parents that are more accessible. Sometimes you're going to get parents that are not accessible. COVID was a wonderful time for parent coaching. I got access to more parents than I ever have in my entire career. But it came with some challenges because it was one of the toughest times parents had in their entire parenting journey also at that time. So you had more access to parents, but you also had more things to help navigate during that situation. So it really does vary. And I wish I had a one size fits all, but it's kind of where in my own way, it's what works for me is looking at things comprehensively. And that's kind of where I had come up with that process too. And my company name and things like that is like comprehensively coming together and finding what fits for this solution right now. And that solution is going to be different. And that solution might work today and it might not work tomorrow, but we're going to work together and figure it out. So the coaching piece is hard, making sure that implementation and practical application of the NDBI practices, following the child's lead, really looking at communication. How do you adjust your communication? How do you support the child exactly where they are right now while helping others to understand how to do that also can vary.
Yes, and I think that's wonderful advice for individuals who are listening who want to integrate or incorporate NDBI into their practice to think about. I love the plane analogy. Again, I love the partnership comments that you've been making about sometimes the pilot has to be in charge. When we have a community and a team, everyone's going to lead. Some people are going to have to follow, right? There should be kind of that one voice. Otherwise, I feel like you have too many cooks in the kitchen and then nothing gets done because no one can agree and everyone's opinion or their perspective they value is more important. And then that kind of stalls things. So I love the kind of pivot to at right now or at this point in time, different people are going to kind of guide the programming or help kind of support that implementation. And it's that team approach, working together and that partnering that's going to really keep everything together. The wheels on the plane, the wings on the plane, like the door shut,
The
like
wings, the wheels, the engine, all the
the
pieces.
plane flying to the destination. That's going to vary from time to time.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah.
Last question for you. How do you stay up to date on NDBI practice, resources, anything that you have found helpful that you could share with the listeners
Mhm.
and your experience?
It, I have to say, it usually is very specific. I come up with a certain, something comes up and I want to learn more about it. And so let's say it is a particular PDA is a great example. Looking at how do we really allow children to have that autonomy? I like to use the gentler acronym for PDA. So really allowing children to have, they just want more autonomy in their everyday. And so when you have a particular family or a particular, let's say a provider, or you're trying to navigate a solution, I like to dig deep in that situation and really look at the research at that point and really look at what's out there in terms of resources and maybe podcasts on it and really try to learn as much as I can from the voices that are doing it. And that really is important to me because the application is something that I'm always looking at. How, not only for myself as a practitioner, a BCBA, but how do I coach others
Yeah.
to also know how to do this and navigate these situations? And how do we really understand how best to support this? It's situation specific often,
Yeah.
because if you take a look at NDBI as a grander scale, and I think some people have done this based off of conversations I've had in the past, when you look at NDBI as a grander scale, like, wow, this is a lot, but how do you apply it?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
when you're looking at a very specific situation, then you're able to isolate and pinpoint and take one step at a time and start building it from there. So just like I would do with a family, whereas like sometimes people come in like, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and this, and this. And here's the game plan for our care plan. And family, you ask a family a week later, how did it go? did you implement all of those things? I'm like, oh, actually, I was really overwhelmed that I couldn't do any of it. Like, okay, let's take it one step at a time. What is the easiest thing you can learn about, or what is the easiest thing that you can do? Or what's the easiest thing for me right now to really sink my teeth in, learn as much as I can with this isolated topic or this isolated thing,
Mhm.
build my knowledge base, have conversations around it. The biggest tip I always have is collaborating and working with other professionals.
Love it.
It's complicated because you're going to have different opinions and
Yeah.
different standpoints on things. But I love a discussion, a real discussion around it. Like, okay, tell me more about that. That might not be what I agree with, and I'm not going to say that right in the conversation, but tell me more about that because I didn't think about it that way. And then you start learning more about the field in a different way. And as people are starting to learn more about NDBI, having those bigger conversations with providers that are very knowledgeable, that are doing the research, that are part of research, that are really deep rooted in the science. How did you get there? How did you come up with that idea? What made you think of that? And having questions and being a good listener is probably how I learn best. It's
Yeah.
not through reading, it's not through watching, it's through asking questions to people who are deeply involved in it.
Yes, and learning from them and then digging more. And I know sometimes I'll have students or trainees. I don't have access to a library. I'm not in a program anymore. Email the lead author on a paper. I have never had a person not send me a free PDF copy of their work, and they always include the main author. So I feel that if you just ask,
Mhm.
and you communicate with others and partner with them, just like what you've been talking about, it's a wonderful recipe for us to be able to make that shift happen.
That's
And
how we learn.
yeah, you have shared so many wonderful tidbits and tips, and I love your airplane analogy. I'm already trying to rework it in my head. Like, that's fun. And at some point, you'll have to tell me the longer analogy.
Yeah, yeah.
It has been so wonderful having you come on and talk with us today. And I have loved learning about your journey and your experience and everything that you're doing at Comprehensive ABA. So I'll make sure to link that in the show notes so people can learn more about what you're doing if they need resources or questions about how to systems application. You would be a wonderful person for them to partner with.
Thank you, Dr. Jamie. This has been a wonderful conversation. I am so excited to continue
Yeah.
to do all the things and have these conversations and just really learn from everybody who's doing the wonderful work.
Thank you again, Anya. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.